James Sample is professor of law at Hofstra University, and he joins me now. James, thanks so much for joining.
Good to be with you, Jim.
So listen, I mean, just as I read those various steps here, there are a lot of potential roadblocks, pitfalls, etc. Begin with this. Who specifically would be held or could be held in criminal contempt here?
That is a very, very good question. And the answer, I think, is that we genuinely do not know. And I don't think it is yet. I think that's yet to be determined. I think what would happen is that if we reach the point where the live testimony under oath occurs, if the Department of Justice and the Trump administration continues to defy and resist providing even a modicum of information to Judge Boasberg, much less providing due process to the individuals who are involved, then I think that the purpose, one of the key purposes of the inquiry, the fact-based inquiry that Judge Boasberg has essentially today threatened to undertake that you described, would be for him to determine who to hold responsible specifically. The obvious candidates include the Attorney General, they include the Secretary of State, they include Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and as well as the lawyers at the Department of Justice, Drew Ensign and others who have been prosecuting this case from the standpoint of the deportations, but it's not yet clear who would suffer the consequences, if anyone.
Well, the trouble is, right, who would pursue someone suffering the consequences, or potentially, because can you imagine the DOJ investigating Trump administration officials? DOJ, of course, currently under Trump management, or the appointment of a special counsel, given the president's own experience with special counsels going back to the first term. I mean, is there anything to ensure that those steps would even take place?
Well, I don't think there's a chance in the world. I agree with the thrust of your question, Jim, that the Department of Justice would meaningfully pursue itself, in essence, for failing to comply with the orders that it's failed to comply with, for failing to comply with the basic provision of facts. But criminal contempt provisions exist in the federal courts that include provisions for federal courts when we're talking about willful defiance of the courts to appoint, and it's not even a special counsel in the sort of Ken Starr mode. This would be special counsel appointed specifically for the purpose of prosecuting this one particular matter, and that individual would be appointed by the court itself. So Judge Boasberg, if we get to that juncture, would have the ability to appoint the prosecutor to essentially prosecute the Department of Justice and or the Trump administration, which is really at this point two birds of the same feather.
So let me ask you to look at the future a little bit, if I can here, because of course this will be appealed and might very well go all the way up to the Supreme Court. Given the Supreme Court's quite broad interpretation of executive power here, do you see the court as backing this up? Because on the other side here, you have the court's very own power being questioned, not just in this case potentially, but of course the case that we're already dealing with, the one regarding this Maryland father who was sent to El Salvador.
Sure. Well, there are definitely two parallel proceedings going on. You've got Judge Paula Zinnes in Maryland, as you mentioned. She just today set forth an expedited discovery process of 2 weeks that is in essence what Judge Boasberg is threatening in today's order in the D.C. case. The one thing I think that is worth really emphasizing here goes to your question about whether the Supreme Court even, would be favorably inclined to respect Judge Boasberg's contempt process or Judge Zinnes's contempt process. And I think one of the things that we sometimes forget when we think of in our normal left-right conservative liberal frame is that the courts, even when they disagree, and the justices, even when they disagree vehemently on questions of ideology and on questions of law, they are in, generally speaking, lockstep when it comes to orders to protect the courts themselves as courts, which is to say, even in this underlying case where it was Judge Boasberg's TRO that was the TRO was lifted and reversed by the Supreme Court, but even in that reversal, a 6-3 reversal of the TRO, that all 9 justices agreed that the individuals who were summarily deemed, arbitrarily deemed by the Department of Justice with no process whatsoever, when they were put on those planes, the court, all 9 of them said those individuals are entitled to due process. And it was Judge Boasberg, remember, who was the judge who was the target of the impeachment threats that led Chief Justice Roberts to do something that is very, very rare, especially for Chief Justice Roberts, which was to issue that statement. All of which comes back to the fundamental point. If you're asking, do you think there will be 5 or maybe even 9 votes to support the judge or the judges and their authority to conduct their courtrooms according to the rule of law, I think there you're not talking about a conservative liberal split. You're talking about judges who will stand up for other judges.
We'll see. It's being tested as we speak. James Sample, Hofstra University. Thanks so much.